Tonight is Tuesday, November 13th, 2018. This is the regular city council meeting for the city of St. Peter. It is 7 o'clock p.m. We will call the meeting to order. Would all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone should have a copy of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second.
All in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next, we have the minutes from our October 22nd, 2018 meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 5 through 8. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? Not, is there a motion for approval?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor of the minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next, we will address visitors. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any agenda item? Seeing no one, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any matter whatsoever? Seeing no one, we will move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 9 and concludes with the resolution on pages 29 and 30, and includes the following budgeted items, in excess of $10,000 to W. Lawrence and Sons Construction for Prairie Ridge Stormwater Basin Erosion Control for $13,075. Following employee appointments: Barbara Farr Clacius for full-time bus driver, Clifford Isley for a part-time bus driver, Dan Greep for a part-time bus driver. The following items are no longer needed and are declared surplus, and we will direct sale those to the Rivers Edge Hospital and Clinic at a price of $26,000. One is a Vermeer trailer, a snow bucket, and globe shades.
My bad. I have an error there, Chuck, that we didn't notice before. Under item 3, those aren't being sold to Rivers Edge Hospital and Clinic. Those will be sold via your regular min bid process. So that's my error, but the
All right.
units are correct.
The first two are correct?
The first 3 units there, but the first 1 and 2 are correct, though.
Run into
Resolution item 1, resolution item 2 are correct.
Okay, so George doesn't want perma-globe shades.
He might, but he'll have to buy them on min bid.
All right, with that change, okay. The December 24th, 2018 council meeting and the December, it should say 17th, workshop meeting are hereby canceled. And then staff is also directed to pay accounts payable prior to the December 31st, 2018 date, and then also prepare a disbursement list for the end of the year, and the council will take that up for consideration at the January 7th, 2019 meeting. Plus the regular schedule of disbursements for October 18th, 2018 through November 7th, 2018. Are there any questions or comments on the consent agenda? If not, with those 2 changes, is there a motion for approval?
Make a
moved,
motion to
Mr. Mayor.
approve. Oops.
There a second? Jerry, second? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Fong.
Aye.
Mayor Snyder.
Aye.
Councilmember Craig.
Aye.
Councilmember Gray.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Evans.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. Next up, we have unfinished business, and we have one item tonight is the housing rehab grant application. Mr. Willie.
Mayor Zeman, members of the City Council, staff is before you tonight seeking your approval for the submission of a pre-application seeking small city development program fundings to provide for an owner-occupied housing rehab program. As you're aware, we've been working with Minnesota Valley Action Council, and you have met on a number of occasions with either Byron Jost or Judge Schultz of Minnesota Valley to talk about the prospects and the opportunities as well as the process. At the end of the legislative session, the Department of Employment and Economic Development indicated to Minnesota Valley Action Council that they had received an additional appropriation for small cities funds, and then they encouraged organizations like NVAC to go out and solicit applications on behalf of member cities or counties. As you'll recall, in 2016, we had graduate students from the Urban Regional Studies Institute at MSU undertake a housing condition survey where they walked every block and observed from the sidewalk the condition of every single-family detached structure. They looked at the roof, the windows, the doors, the foundation, the site, and noted any deficiencies or any issues that may be considered to be in need of repair, and they scored every single house. And when they put the scoring on the GIS system, it was pretty evident that the majority of the houses, perhaps in the lowest standard of condition, are predominantly perhaps in the South Front Street area and then in the area of the Minnesota Square Park. Not surprising, it's the older housing stock in town. The students at MSU then also did a cross-reference with the incomes of the community, and they could track that by U.S. Census block. And they also found then that the area of South Front Street and the area around Minnesota Square Park had the lower incomes in the community. Minnesota Valley Council then came to you, and in August, you authorized them to begin preparing the pre-application, and part of that is they did a survey of the 2 census tract areas that were identified as having the lower incomes. And the results of the survey were encouraging. 138 valid surveys were returned. Of those, 70 income-eligible households indicated that they have an interest in participating in an owner-occupied rehab program. To be eligible, they had to have an income of 80% or less than the Nicollet County median income. So for a family of 4, that income level would be just about the $60,000 a year range, and that's household income. Minnesota Valley Action Council then, with receiving the surveys and the interest, believes that we could submit a very competitive application. And the first step would be to submit a pre-app that would be reviewed by the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. And then the applicants would be scored in 3 categories, 2 which would be suggested to move on to a full application, and if you're in the bottom category, you'd essentially be withdrawn at that point. Minnesota Valley Action Council believes that we have every opportunity to proceed to the final application. The intent would be to apply for $600,000 in Small Cities Development Program funds. $525,000 of that amount would be used to provide programming. $75,000 then would be provide administrative services to Minnesota Valley Action Council. It would be proposed that the city match the $600,000 with a $100,000 appropriation from our restricted housing funds. And as has been explained, those funds cannot be used outside of housing. They couldn't be used for a fire station. They couldn't be used for a new loader or park equipment, if you will. The proposal would be then to fund loans with the $100,000 of up to $4,000 per property. Those would be established at a 0% rate of interest. They would be repaid in full via installments. And they would be able to access for the repayable money 20% of the project cost. So to access the full $4,000, they'd have to have $20,000 then accessed from the small cities funds. So for instance, to get the full $20,000 in small cities funds, you'd have a $40,000 access to the local money, which would be repaid. If you borrowed 10, you'd have access to $2,000. If you borrowed 6, you'd have access to $1,200. The small cities portion, or the $600,000 then provided to the loans of up to $20,000 would be forgiven over a 10-year period. That would be prorated on a 10-year scale and forgiven 10% each year. So if you received the full $20,000 and you remained a resident in that home for 10 years, you would not have to pay back anything. If you borrowed the $20,000 and you moved out after 5 years, you'd have a $5,000 or a $10,000 obligation. If you moved out after 3 years, you'd have a $14,000 obligation. You're asked tonight to approve the resolution in the packet that would authorize MVAC to submit the pre-application. Again, then the pre-apps are scored and you're indicated whether you'd have the opportunity to complete a full application in the February 2019 timeline. If it's granted, it's proposed that Minnesota Valley would administer the grant. That would include determining and documenting the applicant eligibility, reviewing and approving the construction quotes, monitoring lead paint and other environmental issues that must be undertaken, to close on the loans and the grants, to file and record the mortgages that would be necessary, and administer and monitor the repayment of the funds, and then finally to do the grant reporting to the state and the closeout of the grant. These funds can be used for life safety or weatherization or other issues. It cannot be for decorative or to put on a sun porch or for things of that nature. So it's for roofs, windows, doors, foundations, weatherization, and things of that nature. Mr. Mayor, I'd answer any questions that you or members of the council may have, but there is a resolution that is prepared in the packet that would authorize MVAC to make application on your behalf.
Questions for Russ? Russ, to be clear, the city's portion of this, the maximum of $4,000 per loan, we have not determined yet what our method of payback would be yet.
No,
This is
those,
just, excuse me for interrupting.
Oh, sorry, Mayor.
This is just for the 20 or 21,000 coming from the project, from different funds.
well, this would be proposed that the city funds, or the maximum of 4,000 that they could be, would be done as a loan, and that would be repaid.
Right, but we haven't determined yet the terms of that repayment.
I think the grant will have a 0%.
Right,
And it was suggested 10, the fine details, Mayor, if you borrow $2,000, do you want to have $8 a month payments for 10 years? Those types of details, we could establish a minimum payment to
that's,
30,
that's
50.
what I'm referring to.
Yes, sir.
The terms of the, not the percent, but the terms as far as the length of payment and type of
Yeah,
payment.
and there may be a time where you're asked to subordinate the loan, and so
Right.
to develop a subordination policy.
Right.
Those details can be determined
Right.
after you're awarded the
Yeah,
grant.
no, the 0% thing we talked about, but not how, we were talking about maybe prorating like they are or
Right.
something like that, but that has not been determined yet at this point.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Steve?
At the next level, if this loan is approved by deed, the Department of Economic Development, would the council then be approached a second time for more detailed information?
Yes, sir. Staff will be recommending with the assistance and experience of Minnesota Valley Action Council. We'll probably be proposing terms that certainly would need to be ratified and approved by the full council, sir.
Okay.
So if I can, I believe that the process for that would be coming back to the council with that level of detail, you discussing and telling us what direction you want to go. That would be wrapped up into a resolution that accepts the grant.
Okay, all right,
And if I may, I believe we'd return it to you for workshop session also.
Yes.
all right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? The resolution authorizing Minnesota Valley Action Council to submit a pre-application to the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, seeking $600,000 in small cities development funds, appears on pages 33 and 34. Is there a motion for approval?
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Bert.
Councilmember Cohen.
Aye.
Beers.
Aye.
Councilmember Harlan.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Kramer.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Resolution passes. That concludes our unfinished business. Next, we will move to new business, and first up, we have Emerald Ash Borer Management Plan. And Peter,
Mayor Zeman and City Council, tonight I am here to ask you to approve the management plan for the Emerald Ash Borer. As you guys are aware, the last 18 months, the Parks Board has been discussing a variety of situations that are going on throughout Minnesota. Emerald Ash Borer has spread along the Mississippi River and several metro communities, major roadways, and a variety of different areas. It is also spread all the way over to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is on one of the major corridors going east and west through Minnesota here. Our management plan tonight follows a variety of different areas that I wanted to cover with you. One would be the best management practices that we plan to implement for, that would follow the guidelines of urban forest development that we currently implement. We would implement the BMPs related to disposal, removal. We would have a plan for chemical treatment and a plan to relief and/or replant trees on public property. Our goal would be to try to save as many trees as possible, looking at a variety of different treatment options. As we have discussed at workshop, some of the treatment options that are becoming available now are very effective in treating emerald ash borer. It's a matter of funding and how we accomplish that. Staff would bring that back to you, more than likely at a two-year plan during the budget process. We are going to lose some trees. So the main thing to remember here is that we try to save as many as we can, but there are a few trees that are going to go that just won't be able to be saved. In fact, we do have a plan to remove 22 of the poor quality trees throughout the city during the next couple of months to help reduce the impact that EAB could have here. For the last several years, we haven't planted ash trees in our boulevards, and we've encouraged homeowners not to do, or to do the same thing by not planting ash trees on private property, as some of them will be suspect to disposal, or disease and disposal. We've got about 4,800 trees, a little over 1,050 are ash trees, so about 22% of all the trees in our community are ash that are suspect to this disease.
This is on public property,
On
boulevards,
boulevards
And
and
parks?
public property, right.
boulevards and parks.
Yep, so the city has about 4,800 trees. We do not have an inventory of the ash trees on private property. But we do have a tree inventory that we keep in our GIS system, and so we're looking forward to updating that and making sure we have a good handle on what's going on there. Part of our overall plan in BMP would be to create a disposal area and a nursery area that we've identified on page 41. A reforestation plan and an outreach program are vitally important to minimizing the impact of EAB within our community. We're asking that you approve the resolution on page 42 that discusses the management plan that's on pages 37, 38, 39, and 40. And I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Pete, if I could, this is recommended to the council through the tree board, which is the Parks Board.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So this will treat some trees on public property, cut down other trees on public property, and replace a whole bunch of trees with other varieties.
That's correct.
And you will make some determination of which public trees that you want to, this is an injection that takes place every 2 or 3 years, something like that?
Right, it's a trunk injection is the methods that we're looking at using a certain chemical that's very efficient in the treatment process.
And if I have a boulevard ash tree that I would like saved that you have not chosen as one of the chosen few,
That's correct.
I could approach the city and offer to pay for it myself.
That's correct.
And if I have an ash tree on my private property that I am dearly in love with, what would be my alternatives?
You might be able to use the same treatment system that we use. It just depends on how we put that package together.
I mean, it might be through the city, it might be through private.
More than likely, it will be through a private contractor. We would probably bid a portion of that out or get some numbers in here so homeowners can have an idea what it would cost to treat that tree.
Based on the previous council discussion, staff took that as being, you'd like us to help organize that and provide additional information on your website and additional information to folks that call us, if possible.
Correct.
And so, while we might need only 200 injections, maybe we bid out 400 and 200 are made available at that reduced price because of the volume discount to the public in some way. That's how we at least envision it thus far.
Right. And in talking to some of the companies that do that kind of work in the Twin Cities, they are really pushing the treatment because of the effectiveness of survival of the tree.
You anticipate, or people anticipate, that this emerald ash borer infestation will be a wave that rises and then falls over some period of time?
That's part of the theory that's out there right now, is if you can treat your trees long enough to get the EAB, the borer to leave, you have a good survival rate. Will you have to treat your tree forever? More than likely, you're going to have several 2-year cycle treatments to keep your tree alive.
But over some period anticipated to be
I have no idea on what that
10
number
or
would
20
be.
years?
10 or 20 years.
10 or 20 years?
Yep.
And they will run out of ash trees to eat, and the population will dwindle, and the few trees that remain will be those that have been treated.
Yeah, I will probably know more as we see other communities go through this and what methods they've used for survival. But I can't really say that it'll be 10 or 20 years because, people will, as long as the same homeowner lives there, they're probably willing to treat that tree. But if somebody else takes over the property or something happens to it, it's tough to say what would go on there. certainly an option.
Any other questions? Steve?
I just have one. Let's say that a person on their private property has an ash tree and it does get infected, the tree dies. Does the city ever take any kind of action to have the homeowner cut the tree down so it doesn't become a danger to?
Yeah, we have language in our ordinance
Okay.
that clarifies that.
All
And that
right.
would be something that we would look at as well. I think our ordinance basically dealt with a variety of different diseases, so it's kind of vague from the point of it doesn't specifically say EAB. That may be something we want to look at if we don't feel that there's enough leverage or teeth in that ordinance to make those things happen. But if it's a public safety issue, yes, there are methods that we could take to pursue that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Comments? Pete, I know this really doesn't, well, I guess it does in a way have to do with you. I have no problem with the resolution appearing on page 42, the first number, the number 1, that we need this plan. I do have a problem with the second one, and I'm going to take a couple of words that you used, Pete.
Okay.
There's a lot of variables and there's a lot of theories. To me, if we're going to put this on the Environmental Services Fund and other discussions we've had in workshops, we're going to have to raise the rates in the Environmental Services Fund. I would like to see us for the first year, because there are so many variables and theories and costs that we don't know about, to not do that at this point, because it's going to be in perpetuity when we raise, funds, or we raise rates on these funds. I would like to see us take it out of our reserves for this first year until we get a better idea of where we're at. And that's just something I'd like us to take under consideration. We briefly touched about it, I know, in a workshop, and there were different trains of thought on that. Anybody?
I guess I would just say that I think at a rate of $50,000 a year, we're looking at a solid 5 to 10 years of expenses in this fund, or however we're going to pay for it. But we're looking at 5 or 10 years worth of expenses to treat trees,
Maybe
manage
down,
trees.
I agree, maybe down the road, but this first year, I'm not so sure.
So I'm not sure how the first year is different from the rest.
Because of what, we aren't quite sure what the costs are going to be. We aren't quite sure what all of these other things are going to, how it's effective it's going to be, how many we're going to do. And I think we would get a better feel for it down the road. Because it may not seem like much, but once again, we're adding a fee onto, or increasing a fee, and I guarantee you, if it doesn't be, it's going to be this much, we're not going to drop it. We're going to just keep on collecting it. So, if no one else agrees with me, that's just the way it is, but that's my thought on it.
But that's not being decided tonight.
Yeah, it is. Funding for the plan will be provided in the 2019 Environmental Services Fund.
Oh.
That doesn't,
So what you're talking about is just basically taking it out of the reserves for next year.
for 2019.
And then after that, we go
Yeah.
over it and see where
Until
we're
we
at.
get, I agree, we're probably going to have to do something, but if we have to, like I said, there's so many variables, and if I'd feel better about it if we knew or a lot better about it if we knew a little closer to what the numbers were going to be. And, once again, we seem to raise rates and fees, but we don't ever seem to lower them. And if that just happens, it's the way government is sometimes.
Expenses keep going up, right?
Expenses do keep going up.
We didn't have to deal with
But our
Emerald Ash Borer
reserves-
10 years
Our reserves
ago.
are going up also.
That's true. I think that sooner or later we'll have to take this out. I guess I don't have a strong opinion about it, but I don't think it's unreasonable to put it in environmental services. It seems like a good match to the work that's being done, and if anything, these numbers are fairly conservative, so it's not as though this money wouldn't get spent. I mean, there's more need for treating this issue than what we have available or what we've budgeted here, so. But I don't feel very strongly about it, so if others
Would you
agree.
be willing to do half and half?
Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there. I guess I'd listen to other people's response. I'd be willing to listen to anything. Half and half, I'm not sure what, you know, I'm not going to repeat myself, I guess.
Well, we're certainly going to be spending something
Yeah,
every year. In the
and
first
we were
year-
talking about $50,000. But I don't know, what that equated to, I can't remember the number, but it was quite an increase, like a 16% increase. Even though it's not a big dollar amount, it's like a 16% increase in our environmental fees that we charge.
If I may try and help, Mayor and members, you don't necessarily have to earmark funding as a part of this resolution. From a staff perspective, it's handy if you do, but you don't have to. The approval of the plan itself does not bring with it an expenditure without approval of budget. Your environmental service budget has not been approved yet. You've discussed it on a couple of different occasions, so it has not been approved yet. Your general fund budget has been not finally set, but you have a preliminary budget assembled. You could take it from reserves, you could cut other programs or other efforts to fund this at whatever level, whether it's $10 or $50,000. And so it certainly can be something that how you fund the work of the plan can certainly be discussed at a later time.
So you're suggesting we could move this resolution by, after eliminating point number 2?
You could, from my perspective, Councilmember Kwame, if you do that, we will still come back to you and
Oh, yeah.
discuss it as a part of the environmental services budget.
And then we discuss it at a workshop and
Yeah.
be more.
Yeah, and that's,
It's got to be funded somehow.
yeah, we got to fund it somehow, and that's, I guess, thank you, Todd, that's my point. Now, here it says we are taking it out of there, and with the discussions we had before, we were saying if, in order to take it out of there with the funds that are there, we're going to have to raise the fees or the rates on this.
Would you allow me to move it without number 2?
I would allow anything you want, you can move anything you want, and see if you get a second on it.
I will move the
So,
resolution.
just a second, if you would wait, I'm sorry, John.
How would that affect the overall health of the general, the fund balance, the reserves? 50,000, 5%, 8%?
No, $10,000 impacts your tax rate to the point of .01.
Yeah. I'm just wondering for the people at home, more than likely, I mean, we're hearing,
Yeah, I mean-
we know this information, but
So as staff has said to you before, I think the challenge that you're faced with is that the universe of payers that are related to your environmental service fund is different in some respects than the universe of payers that contribute to your general fund.
Right.
And so there are non-taxable entities that contribute to your environmental service fund. General fund is only tax-paying entities. So there's a whole discussion on that. It's not my goal as a part of this for you to have a monumental budget discussion. We're trying to get you to approve a plan, and you can have a discussion about where the money's coming from later.
And that's, I guess, my point, is that we may end up taking or increasing or doing something on the environmental services fund after we look at it more. But now we're saying we are taking it out of there, and then therefore we'll have to. John?
So call on me.
John?
I move the resolution eliminating the now therefore number 2.
I will second that. Any other discussions or comments? Call the roll, please, Mark.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Cardin.
Aye.
Councilmember Bryan.
aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Graves.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Plum.
Aye.
Resolution passes with that one change.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Pete.
Next up, we have a warming house attendant position description. Joey is here tonight.
Oh,
Mr. Schugel.
and before he gets going, I got to tell you on page 45 and 46, I have 2 errors in what I included in the packet. The first one is under required interpersonal skills. In the first line, the third to the last word says library. It does not need to say library. And then the last one on page 46 is please note. That please note is something that we would not typically include in job descriptions, so should be eliminated. So before I put him on the spot for this one, I should make sure that I'm giving him the right stuff. Joey?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor and councilors, I am here tonight seeking approval of the establishment of a warming house attendant job description. If you recall, a little time ago, you approved an official wage scale for this position. And this is a position that is a seasonal position that is during the winter months at Veterans Park, supervising the warming house and all the activities going on there. We have not had an official job description in the past. There will not be any fiscal impact to this. If you, the official job description, or the proposed job description is attached in your packet. If you do not act, we would continue to proceed as we have in the past with this position, and duties would be assigned as staff has recommended. So I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Joey, is it accurate to say that with a job description in place, this gives us something to score applicants against, so it provides a more uniform system for hiring people rather than the less formal process we had previously?
Correct. So with approval tonight, we would use this job description in recruitment during the hiring process, interviewing process, and have some expectations and job duties laid out that both the candidates would know of ahead of time and staff would be comfortable with assigning.
Joey, if I can, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
So also, you had mentioned earlier that there's not really any fiscal impact. Can you explain why there's not really any fiscal impact to this?
I sure can. So, what we would, we need warming house attendants either way. So the fiscal impact is we're paying this out of our recreation budget, whether we have an official job description or not.
Any questions? John?
I'm surprised that we don't do a background check for a warming house attendant.
It's not that we didn't do it, John, it's just that we typically do not have that addressed within the body of the job description. We already have a policy developed that says when we do a background check of that type, and so that policy would be filed or followed regardless of whether it's in the job description or not, John.
Anyone else? The resolution for a warming house attendant job position description appears on page 47. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions? Susie?
Mayor?
Oh,
So with the weather on track the way it is, how soon will we be hiring this warming house attendant?
Yesterday.
Any predictions from you or Mr. Moulton yet?
You know, it would be nice to have a nice outdoor skating season. But with approval tonight, we'll start recruitment as soon as possible and hopefully get some qualified applicants in as soon as possible.
If I can, if we do have the opportunity for ICE earlier than we can meet the timeline for advertising, we will hire people in a temporary fashion.
Okay.
And we already have some folks that have done this before that are very likely to do it, but our goal here is to provide for that more transparent, formalized process, and I think Joey's done a good job on kind of pushing that forward. It's good for all of us to know what the rules of the game are.
Steve?
In looking at the job description, this may not be a requirement, but it would be nice as a nice to, is having someone that has the ability to ice skate so that they can interact with the folks that are on the ice skating rink, and rather than sitting in a building, interact with the people on the ice. That's just a thought.
Any other comments or questions? Call the roll, please.
Me too.
Councilmember Garland.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Graves.
Aye.
Councilmember Clayton.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Resolution passes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joey. Next up, we have Rivers Edge Hospital and Clinic equipment purchase. And George is with us tonight.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. On page 48 is a request and recommendation for your authorization of purchase of 3 capital pieces of equipment. Anesthesia machine, which you have seen once before if you've been with the council for a couple of years, and then a washer and a steam sterilizer. These items are part of our equipment plan in the expansion project of the hospital. That particular equipment package is budgeted. The costs, what you see is the list price, and we fully expect the purchase price, when completely negotiated, will not exceed that amount, and in fact will be less than the total of the $415,393. This equipment is paid for as part of our expansion project, and these pieces of equipment we're putting this together so that we can issue the POs before the end of December and avoid the typical and usual price increases that happen to change a calendar year. Questions or other information I can give you?
Jeff?
How many sterilizers are there currently? Are there two? Or just
We
one?
have one large sterilizer and one small.
Okay.
So we'll basically be doubling that, but we are effectively doubling
Right.
the amount of ORs.
And George, you're here tonight because these pieces of equipment exceed a certain amount, is that right?
That's correct.
$50,000 threshold?
$50,000, yes.
Okay, all right. Anyone else? The resolution approving equipment purchases for Rivers Edge Hospital and Clinic appears on page 49. Is there a motion for approval?
Move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any more questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Member Brand,
Aye.
Member Johnson,
Aye.
Member Gray,
Aye.
Member Piper,
Aye.
Member Clooney,
Aye.
Mayor Ziegler.
Aye.
Member Garber.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Next up, we have a wastewater ponds realtor agreement. And Todd?
Mayor and members, included in your packet on page 50 is the memo, and then the documentation follows after that. I'm recommending that you approve a execution of a realty agreement with Whitetail Properties Real Estate. Whitetail Properties specializes in this type of utilized land. You've had it realted previously through Caldwell Banker, and we haven't had any success. This provides for 7% commission if sold at a certain level, and then under a certain level, it provides for a 5% commission. As the council discussed at its last workshop, you wanted to have the state of Minnesota and its agencies excluded from this agreement, so they have been excluded in the new draft you see included in your packet. This agreement would run for essentially a year. As we've talked about previously, any sale, any agreement to sell would have to come back to the city council before it was done. This doesn't allow me to sell the land without your approval. It just establishes listing agreement. Again, the information is included in your packet, and the resolution providing approval or accepting the listing agreement is included on page 60.
Questions? John?
If we're eliminating the state of Minnesota, which we have been negotiating with in the past, and they have made offers that are not quite as much as we have wanted, why does the exclusion say that we don't have to pay a sales commission only if the state pays full price? Why aren't they just exempted no matter who we sell it, no matter what we sell it to them for?
John, it was my assumption that the reason that you had not agreed to terms with the state of Minnesota before is because it was under the appraised value.
Sure, and situations might change, and they might have an offer of something else, and who knows what sort of arrangement we might make in the future. I'm not sure why this full price. Mr. Brandt is the real estate genius here in the room.
I think it's fair,
It's a fair question.
I think it's a fair question for him. I think that typically when you exclude somebody, exclude them, you know.
Yeah, you just exclude them.
It's not common thing to see.
If that's the council direction, that's no problem for me. Maybe you want to give me latitude within the resolution to additionally negotiate that just slightly differently.
I agree. I hadn't caught that, but, yeah, I mean, if we got the state to agree to 10,000 less than the asking price, I think.
But they throw in something else for us that
Right.
we want.
I think that we could see that as a reasonably good deal. And we have, since we do have prior communication with them, I don't know that should be expected that we'd pay the realtor fee in that case, so.
So in that case, wouldn't, I'm sorry. Yeah. So in that case, wouldn't it be more wise of us to table this until we get the actual contract that we want to see in front of us?
I think it's certainly up to the council. If you want to give me latitude to say it's only approved if the state of Minnesota and its agencies are fully excluded, then that's fine.
Okay.
Then it would only go into place if it was fully excluded.
Okay.
That-
I'd rather go that route just so that we can keep it moving along rather than
Okay.
tabling it for several weeks.
All right, any other questions or comments? Susie, would you like to make any?
In that case, I will make a motion to approve this resolution, providing latitude to the city administrator to renegotiate the Realtor commissions if we make a sale to the state of Minnesota at any price.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Johnson?
All right.
Councilmember Brandt?
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Councilmember Coleman?
Aye.
Mayor Ziegler?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Mayor Brandt?
Aye.
Resolution passes. That concludes our new business. Next up, we have reports, and didn't make it to I personally didn't make it to the high school yesterday for the veterans, but Mr. Pfeiffer and I were down at the park on November 11th on Sunday for the veterans short ceremony they had there, basically commemorating the end of World War I. And pretty good turnout for a blistery cold day, but a nice little, short little 15-minute program. And that's all I have.
Mayor members, I'll just work my list pretty quickly. First of all, I want to mention to you that the goal session report is included in this packet, so if you have any questions or concerns about that, please let me know. Again, this is not meant to be minutes of that meeting. This is meant to be kind of an encapsulation of the discussion, or if you gave specific direction. And so I think it's helpful, and you use it at your next goal-setting session as kind of the basis for where you move from there, so I wanted to include that. Also want to provide for an election recap, and there's one thing that we typically talk about, and that's the not the number of folks voting, but the percentage compared to registered voters within our community. And so this year we were right near 80%. And so that's a wonderful turnout, including the folks that not only visited the polls on those days, but the absentee ballots as well. So that's fantastic. I would also mention one other item, thanking the fairgrounds folks, the board, for allowing us to use the fairgrounds. It worked out really well. Barb did a great job, and things were laid out and worked efficiently, I think. And so for everybody that got a note or saw the sign or saw it on Facebook or saw it on our webpage or read it in the newspaper, they all got to the right place. And so we're happy for that. And again, that space worked out, I think, very well. Next thing that I have is the ICLV trip report. I just wanted to comment on this just a little bit. Some of you may recall that you sent me on this trip. ICLV stands for Intercity Leadership Visit. Council members Kwame have attended in the past. I'm trying to think who else. Susie Carlin attended once in the past. These are wonderful opportunities to really think about our region and how we compare to other regions. This year we went to Fayetteville, Bentonville. Well, what they like to call themselves is Northwest Arkansas, NWA. And of course the population there is pretty big, and they have a number of international Fortune 500 companies that operate out of that area. So it's just fascinating to see some of the things that they have going on, including the Walton family, the Hunt family, and the Tyson family, who do wonderful things for not-for-profits in that area. As I was mentioning to someone earlier, there are over 1,200 not-for-profits registered within those 4 communities, which is just an unbelievable number. And the amount of money that flows through those nonprofits for arts and all kinds of other things is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. But
Don't we have a couple of local celebrities that attended school there or from that area?
we have a celebrity or two that attended school there. They did have a flag and kind of a thing for them, but that was kind of a windy day. They didn't have it up that day.
Mr. and Mrs. Brandt. by the
Yeah,
way, yes.
their city attorney and his spouse are graduates there. What's the mascot there? Razorback. I can't. They taught us the cheer too, but now I can't remember that. Maybe we'll ask you to do that after camera is on. But again, a wonderful opportunity certainly for us to visit with folks from that area, but also think about what's going on in our area and how we can improve things and continue to work together. So there is certainly value in that. So as it comes up again in 3 to 5 years, if you're still around, we'd love to encourage folks to be able to continue to attend. About 80 people went. Certainly a few government people, a few not-for-profit people, but the vast majority of folks were business folks within our region. And so they're looking at how things work. And so it's really fascinating. The next one I wanted to mention was vacation rental by owner update. Some of you, no one's quizzed me on this yet, but some of you may recall that we indicated at a previous meeting that it would be taken up by the council today. That did not happen due to an error on our part, in that, based on the discussion, it had to go back to planning and zoning, which of course hasn't met yet in this cycle. So it'll go back to planning and zoning, then come back to you. So we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, and we didn't let that just kind of fly by without anyone noticing. Mayor, members, that's all I have for reports. I do have a request for closed session, a resolution for that, which is on page 61 of your packet. 3 closed sessions, which will all be held separately. One is for the Streets Union, the second is for the Utilities Union, and then the third is for you to discuss the city administrator annual evaluation. None of these do we anticipate you would come back into regular session to take action on. The only action that I would anticipate you'd come into session again would be to adjourn.
Before I ask for resolution for the closed session, is there anyone, council, that has anything to add or talk about? Jeff?
Yes, there's something I'd like to read aloud, if I may. Dear Mayor Zeman and members of the St. Peter City Council, I am writing to inform you of my resignation as City Council member of the North Ward effective January 1st, 2019. Being elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives, I wish to give adequate time in order to find a suitable replacement without interruption of regular council business. I have enjoyed serving with all of you. Thank you for helping me make our community a great place to live. Lastly, I want to recognize the members of the community that have been supportive of me since 2011. Sincerely, Jeff Brand.
Thank you, Jeff. Anyone else? If there's nothing else to add, then on page 61, there's a resolution calling for a closed session to discuss union negotiations with the Local 70 for the streets, Local 70 for the utilities, and for the city administrator performance evaluation. Is there a motion for approval?
So
I'll make a
moved,
motion.
Mr. Mayor.
Second it.
Any questions or comments on? Call the roll, please, Bart.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Councilmember Paul?
Aye.
Mayor Zeman?
Aye.
Councilmember Garland?
Aye.
Mayor Burton?
Aye.
Mayor Johnson?
Aye.
Resolution is approved. We will adjourn to closed session, and as Todd stated earlier, we will come back into open session, but only to adjourn our regular meeting. Thank you, and we will meet right here.
We'll just say.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. We'll make it.